What's going on, everyone? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. It is the 31st of October, 2023, and on this Halloween episode, we're going to talk about the breaking news overnight in the NBA with James Harden being traded before we get into the Eagles win. And then we're going to wrap it up by me finally saying good night to the Philadelphia Phillies season. Before we get into the show, though, please hit that subscribe button if you're joining us on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, definitely give the show a follow, 5-star review. It helps beyond measure what that does for our show. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram. All our social media handles will be in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, I got the show's account handles right here on screen for you. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So starting off the show today, we got a jam-packed show today, a lot to talk about. So starting off, wasn't even on the show doc when I went to bed last night, but when I woke up this morning, it is leading off the show. James Harden has been traded to the Los Angeles Clippers after laying siege for months. Daryl Morey finally accepts what he thinks is the best offer from the Los Angeles Clippers for James Harden, and he pulled the trigger on the trade. It always seemed like the Clippers were the favorite here. You know, it always kind of seemed like that's where he wanted to go. It's where it seemed that team was the most receptive to dealing for James Harden, even with all the shenanigans that he has been pulling off in this early preseason. And it really, I think, was better than I anticipated. I know, kind of one of the big sticking points for Daryl Morey in negotiations was Terrence Mann, guard for the Clippers, wing player, very young, 27 years old, so kind of in the prime of his career, but good defender. And this was a guy that Daryl Morey really wanted. Instead, he ended up settling for picks and what he thought was the best deal from the Clippers. But with this deal, I think it's important to mention, it doesn't appear that Morey's done with this deal. He stocked up on multiple picks, multiple expiring contracts, and what that's going to do is it's going to give Daryl Morey flexibility to make moves in the near future, and also, as we move on in the future, to bolster the Sixers roster for this playoff run and potentially years and years to come with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey as your focal point of your franchise, right? So let's get into the full details of the trade before I kind of talk winners and losers and what I think, it's all going to come down to. So what the Clippers got, they ended up getting not just James Harden, but also PJ Tucker and Filip Petrusev. Filip is a rookie from overseas, so he, was kind of included in this deal. PJ Tucker, kind of stinks from a leadership and locker room perspective to get rid of PJ Tucker, but we saw in the playoffs last year in that game 6 where Philly had the lead late in the fourth quarter and PJ got in Joel Embiid's ass, like on the court, like everyone was really watching, and he got in, and it really, he couldn't apply that spark. I think throughout the season he was very important, to create a great locker room, to create a great, chemistry within the team. And, he held a lot of players accountable. I thought it was very, very encouraging from him. And that's why you brought him in. A lot of people were a little upset that you signed a 37-year-old undersized power forward to a 3-year, $30 million contract. But what the Sixers do in this deal is they kind of understand their mistake there and they get up and they get off of it. So they include PJ Tucker, and PJ, as a side note, was one of James Harden's biggest supporters, one of his best friends just in real life, from everything they've said. So I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion that in order to get everything that the Sixers wanted, they were going to probably have to include PJ Tucker in this deal. And honestly, I think it makes the most sense. PJ's ready to win. I think the Sixers are ready to win as well. But, they're also looking a little bit towards the future with some of these moves. So they include PJ there. And then, obviously, the main centerpiece of the deal, guard James Harden. It's going to be really interesting to see what his role is in there. But that package of 3 players garnered back a pretty big load for the 76ers. So what they got was 4 players in the form of forward Marcus Morris, forward Robert Covington, former process Sixer, forward Nicholas Batum, and also forward KJ Martin. They also got a 2028 first-round pick. They also got another first-round pick courtesy of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I believe in 2026 was the deal. Let me get this right. So we got the 2026 first-round pick via Oklahoma City. And then they also have a 2028 first-round pick via the Los Angeles Clippers. They also got 2 second-round picks and a 2029 pick swap. So what the Sixers got here was theoretically 3 first-round picks, because whoever has the better pick in 2029 with the pick swap, the Sixers will get the better selection of the 2. So what are we talking? We're in 2023. That's 6 years down the line. We're talking about the Clippers core of Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook. These guys are all in their 30s, and in 6 years, all of them may not be on the Clippers, and the Clippers may be rebuilding by that point. So you're talking about that pick has a lot of potential to be very, very well as the 2028 first-round pick you got from the Clippers as well. So those 2 future picks have a lot of value in terms of potential, right? And that's what we're dealing with picks, right? And they also were able to, and the pick swap's not really a first-round pick because, if the Clippers had a better record than the Sixers in 2029, the Sixers just keep their pick, right? So it was really important for the Sixers to get a second first-round pick. And what the Clippers and the Sixers did was, of course, they included Oklahoma City in this deal. And Oklahoma City sent a 2026 first-round pick from, actually, it was not, I think they already had it. Clippers may have already had it. Regardless, no. This is my fault. The 2026 pick from OKC actually did come from Oklahoma City. It was the Clippers' first-round pick that the Clippers gave up in the Paul George trade when they sent all those picks and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to Oklahoma City. One of those Clippers picks. So the Thunder did get involved on this deal somehow, some way. I'm not exactly sure, what they ended up getting. Or they just wanted to get in on a deal. Regardless, so the Sixers got 2 first-round picks in the future, and then as well as pick swap. They also got the 2 second-round picks as well, which we saw last year at the trade deadline. Multiple second-round picks are enough to get rental veteran players for your playoff run. So that was a lot that we just went through that the Sixers got back. 4 players, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. So that is a pretty good haul. Honestly, I really like it. I like Terrence Mann as a player. I think he's really solid. He's under contract. I think he would fit in. But what you get from this deal, first of all, is expiring contracts that are going to be valuable. Here's the Sixers expiring contracts from there. Marcus Morris Sr. is owed $17 million this year, expiring contract. Nicholas Batum is owed $11 million this year, expiring contract. Robert Covington is owed $11.6 million this year, expiring contract. All 3 of those guys who were just acquired are all expiring. And what I mean by that is they only have 1 year left on their contracts. This is the year. This is the last year of their contracts. Along those same lines, the Sixers also have Kelly Oubre, $2 million cap hit this year on expiring deal. DeAnthony Melton, $8 million expiring deal. And then the big one, Tobias Harris, owed $39 million this year. And this is the last year of his atrocious deal that the Sixers signed him to. Shout out to Tobias Harris. He got his money. If they offer $150 million, you'd be stupid not to take it. But I think this has kind of handcuffed the Sixers from making big moves over the last couple years. So now that Tobias is on an expiring deal, his trade value has skyrocketed. So you're talking about 6 players there with value around the league on expiring contracts. You get 2 first-round picks, which do have value. So here I got a Derek Bodner, Sixers writer. The 2026 pick that the Thunder are sending the Sixers will be the least favorable pick out of the few picks that the Thunder possess that year. So the Thunder have 1 million picks, and the Thunder have a million picks, and they got in here. So here's where the Oklahoma City got on this. The Clippers are sending, this is via Woj, ESPN, the Clippers are sending a 2027 first-round pick swap. So first-round pick swap in 2027 to Oklahoma City, and that cleared the way for Oklahoma City to move a protected first-round pick to the 76ers. So the pick is a little less exciting because there is protections on there, but it is still, I wanted to get to the bottom of how the Thunder were there, so I'm happy, I was able to see that. But, you kind of talk about it, and, with the expiring deals, with the contract, all that stuff that we were kind of getting into with that, Daryl Morey, I think he's going to make another deal. This just sets the table for Daryl to be aggressive again and to really capitalize because, as valuable as these picks are and how they might be, they probably have more value to other teams. And also, Marcus Morris wasn't really playing a lot with the Clippers this year so far. Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, older guys on the wing. KJ Martin is, kind of a good get here, a young, big, super athletic, understands how to cut off the ball. That's been something the Sixers have, very, very, have been desperate to acquire. Very athletic bigs to play along Joel Embiid. I think Nick Nurse is going to love this guy. A guy that crashes the glass, will cut, and is super athletic. That's right up Nick Nurse's alley. Obviously, the return of Robert Covington, I think a lot of Sixers fans are going to be really excited about, just because he was there during the darkest days of the process, went away from the Sixers, and blossomed into a very, very good player who was sought after in the league. And now that he's a little bit older, is finally coming back to the Sixers, which is pretty much the exact player that they need, which is funny enough. Also, Marcus Morris, a very good scorer of the basketball in a half-court setting. Nicholas Batum, very good defensive player, long, understands the game, been around a long time, very, very high basketball IQ. So all four of those forwards fit a need for the Sixers, which is funny enough because you get rid of James Harden and you get rid of PJ Tucker. And what did those players provide for the Sixers, right? PJ Tucker started, and he was often in the dunker spot or in the corner three, in either corner, ready for three. And what that did was it clogged the lane up more for Joel Embiid post-ups. And James Harden being on the ball also meant Tyrese Maxey had to play off the ball. So when you move these guys out, you're allowing the paint to open up for Joel Embiid post-ups, as well as Tyrese Maxey to be on the ball and to create and to develop and to flourish. And what you acquire back for those players in Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, and KJ Martin, more so the top three than KJ Martin, is you get guys who are, number one, known shooters. So, a lot of guys around the league, first name that just popped into my head, I don't know why, but Gary Payton II, incredible defender. But the reason why he's able to stay on the court is he's able to make three-pointers from the corner. But he hasn't had a long track record of doing that. So teams are daring him to shoot, and they're crashing in the paint. Whereas guys like Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris are proven three-point threats. So when you put them on the wing or when you put them in the corner, the defenders, the help side defenders on a Joel Embiid post-up have to kind of think twice, maybe even just a half a second, like, wait, that's Robert Covington. Scouting report says he's a great shooter from three. And you maybe take a half a step back to Covington, and then you're like, wait a minute, Joel Embiid's the MVP. And by the time you're going back to double team, Joel is already up in his upward shooting motion. So I think now that you have more established players, more so Covington and Batum than Morris, but Morris is still an above average three-point shooter, at least has been doing it, like I mentioned, for many years so far. You just have more reliability, and they also fit more of a need in terms of perimeter defenders, right? Very long, athletic guys. Marcus Morris, more of a paint defender, a little bit more bulky, but Nicholas Batum can kind of play on the perimeter and on the inside. Robert Covington, more of a perimeter 3-and-D guy, typical. And then KJ Martin, a lot more of a traditional power forward. Honestly, I'm talking myself into these guys. Obviously, I kind of prefaced a lot of it with all expiring contracts, right? Daryl Morey got a lot of picks, got expiring contracts, is probably going to move, I would say, one or two of these players. I think he wants to keep KJ Martin. out of these four players, I think KJ Martin probably is the most valuable because A, he's under contract. I believe it's only his second year. It might be his third year. Regardless, he has multiple years under contracts. He's young. He's athletic. Like I said, he's a player that I think Nick Nurse profiles as very valuable to his rotation. So when you're talking about Morris, Covington, and Batum, I think you probably see one or two of them plus picks moved in another deal. Maybe if there's a high-level guard that this has kind of been linked already after this deal. The Sixers are looking for another guard, high-level playmaker. Maybe you include multiple of those, but I think Covington fits right in. I think they want to keep him probably, depending on Marcus Morris and his playing situation, playing time, minutes. Maybe he says, listen, I appreciate it, but I'd like to be moved somewhere where I'm going to play more. Understandable, totally understandable. I think Batum is kind of just a throw-in. I think he's probably the most likely to be moved. But also another underrated aspect of this deal, just the veteran presence. I mean, obviously PJ Tucker, that was one of his main calling cards. Marcus Morris, tough guy just like PJ Tucker. Kind of he's cut from that same cloth, brings that same energy. Robert Covington understands Joel Embiid, understands the Philly fans, understands he's been around the league now, so now he has more of an understanding of how the league works and can do that. And Nicholas Batum, I mean, he's been around forever out in Portland, Los Angeles. He's done his time and he's done very, very well for his career. So honestly, I don't know. I think the Sixers win this trade, and if you're only talking addition by subtraction, getting James Harden out of here and just just get the whole Ben Simmons, James Harden saga just in the rearview mirror. Just take it and put it in the corner and just not worry about it. And now you can move forward. I think that alone makes this a win for the Sixers. It seems like this is who the Clippers wanted all along. They have older, injury-prone stars that they, maybe some nights they don't have Paul George. Some nights they don't have Kawhi Leonard. Now you have a guy in James Harden who can carry the load offensively, also distribute when those guys are available, right? So I think it's a win-win. I think the Clippers, they kind of made their bed with this one by being aggressive, and being one of the few teams to really engage with the Sixers on James Harden. And, they're probably they probably have a similar championship odds even after this deal to the Sixers. So I think it's a good deal for the Clippers, but they did give up a ton, I feel like. And for the Sixers, they loaded up on a ton of ammo to potentially make another deal. And even if they don't, I think they got more fit-related players that can allow Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey to dominate. It can allow Joel Embiid to continue to play his game. It can continue to be his team. And Tyrese Maxey can also develop with the ball in his hands in Nick Nurse's kind of in his system, right? So overall, I think it was a good deal. I think it was a good deal since they weren't able to get Terrence Mann and they were kind of holding firm for that. I think this is the next best thing. Honestly, I might even take this package over Terrence Mann and 2 picks, if I'm the Sixers. So overall, I think it was a very, very good deal, and I'm really excited to see kind of what happens next because I know that Daryl Morey is not done. I'm going to just do a quick Woj search just to make sure while I've been recording for the last 20 minutes that, nothing happened because, something definitely could happen. Nope. All right, we're all clear there. So that's going to just wrap it up for our trade talk. It's been a crazy, it's been a crazy couple years that, it's been this whole saga for the Philadelphia 76ers, and then also just a crazy start to the year. So we'll definitely get into more NBA talk as the season goes on, and we'll continue to discuss that as the year goes. But now we are going to move into the second portion of our show today, and that is going to talk about of course, Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, moving to 7-1, the best team in the NFL. Let me get a little round of applause for my Philadelphia Eagles there. Yes, indeed. They take down the Washington Commanders 38-31 on Sunday. Their last 1 p.m. game until Week 17, so just shows you what the league thinks about the Birds. And And it was a great game. I mean, the Commanders play us better than anybody in the league, which makes absolutely no sense. But, you know, they must feel great when the Birds come to town or when they come to Philadelphia, which is extremely strange. But as tough as they played the Eagles this season, Eagles ended up 2-0 against the Commanders. They moved to 2-0 in the division, and they're really they're set up well with Dallas coming into town this week, and then as they go into their bye week in week 9, week 10. So overall, let's get into the game in our breakdown. We always start with number 1, Jalen Hurts. This was arguably Jalen Hurts' best game of the season, and one of his better games in his young career. So what did Jalen Hurts do that was so special in this game? Well, he set season high in completions, yards, touchdowns, and passer rating. So it's pretty much all you can ask for. Obviously, at 29 completions, 4 passing touchdowns, he had a passer rating of 135.7, and he's had 319 passing yards. Jalen was just absolutely phenomenal in this game. You could tell he's still dealing with that injury. It's still hindering him a little bit, but his mobility, was still kind of there. He had a big third down run where he scrambled and got out of bounds but he didn't really run that much. Only had 4 carries for 6 yards with a long of 7, which shows you he had a couple negative ones in there, but also was able to, big scramble first down. And that's something that separates Jalen. And that's something that's so important for him is when third down, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, when the play breaks down and he's able to scramble and pick up those first downs, that's when the Eagles offense really is just a handful for the other team, because you have to deal with A.J. Brown. You have to deal with Devontae Smith. You have to deal with Dallas Goedert. You have to deal with the run game. You have to deal with DeAndre Swift out of the backfield, all those running backs out of the backfield. And then you have to deal with Jalen Hurts' designed run game. And then if you stop all that, you have Jalen Hurts scrambling. So when he adds that aspect to his game, with the Eagles offense is an absolute handful. The bye week cannot come soon enough for Jalen. I think that knee is hurting, but I think the only thing that you can really do, they've said there were some reports that came out that kind of compared it to kind of like a bone bruise, but like in his knee. So not anything structural, not anything, super, super wrong. But it's just kind of something that will heal with time. So I think the bye week, just rest, able to recover and really get his rehab going. Hopefully for the toughest part of our schedule when we come out of the bye with Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco, he's feeling up to par with his health. But if you're watching the game, you really wouldn't know if he's not feeling good, because he had a phenomenal game, and he's playing at an MVP level. The odds are flying towards Jalen Hurts to win MVP this year, along with Tua Tagovailoa. I think those guys are the front runners as of right now. But the Eagles currently have the best record in the league. They've beaten Miami, and if they beat Dallas this week and they come out and they're hot against the toughest part of their schedule, like I mentioned, with Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas again, if they can only maybe lose one of those games and Jalen Hurts plays great in all of them, he's got to be the front runner for for MVP. And there's been a lot of talk about the Eagles offense. Brian Johnson and his play calling, and has been great. And while I will agree that his red zone play calling has not been my favorite, the Eagles offense is still playing very, very well. This game really could have been much worse. It was 38-31, and the Eagles fumbled 2 times inside the 5-yard line. So you're talking about something the Eagles do in their sleep, which is score from short yardage. One of them was a fumble on the brotherly shove, and then another one was a fumble to Kenny Gainwell as he was 3 yards away from the end zone and, just kind of got tripped up on. So the Eagles very well here could have scored over 50 points and really just put this game out of reach in a way. But we got some numbers here. Obviously, Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator last year. A lot of people miss Shane Steichen and what he was able to do for this offense. And here's the thing. Last year, the Eagles were third in total yards per game. They were ninth in passing yards per game, fifth in rushing yards per game, and third in points per game. So, let's talk about this year. The Eagles are third in total yards per game, only averaging 2 fewer yards per game, 387 this year as opposed to 389 last year. In terms of passing yards per game, they are sixth this year with 255 per game. Last year, it was only 241 per game, which they were ninth in the league in last year. This year, rushing yards per game, they are fourth in the NFL with 142.7. Last year, they had 147.6, and they were fifth in the league. This year, they're averaging 28 points per game, which is fourth in the league. Last year, they were averaging 28.1 points per game, which was third in the league. So you're talking about all the major indicators for success for an offense: yardage, passing yardage, rushing yardage, points. Everything you really need to do to win games. They're right in line with where they were last year. Obviously, the turnovers have been a big issue. Play calling in the red zone has been a big issue. Injuries have been a bigger issue this year than they were last year. And yet, they're still playing very, very well. And a lot of that is attributed to Jalen Hurts. A lot of that is attributed to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. These guys have remained healthy, knock on wood, and that's been a huge reason why they've been able to continue success despite other factors like turnover luck or injuries or questionable play calling. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that from an offensive perspective because I thought those numbers were very, very interesting to kind of say. I mentioned him already, but A.J. Brown should now be included in the MVP talk right next to Tyreek Hill. Maybe not to be number one in the MVP consideration, but wherever Tyreek Hill is in the MVP ladder, A.J. Brown deserves to be right there. I want to get the numbers up on A.J. Brown's season because he's been absolutely phenomenal. This season, 2023 regular season, 8 games played so far. He's at 939 yards through 8 games. He's already got 60 receptions this year for 939 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he's just been an absolute monster. Like I said, he's almost at 1,000 yards 8 games into the season. He also set an NFL record on Sunday with his 6th consecutive game totaling 125 plus yards receiving. I mean, breaking Calvin Johnson's NFL record. He has just been on another level, and it really comes down to the trust that Nick Sirianni and more specifically Jalen Hurts have in A.J. Brown. A blossoming superstar in this league. He's only 25 years old, and he is just an absolute freight train, in a ballerina costume, if that even makes sense. Just has the most soft hands, unbelievable feet, unbelievable awareness of the sideline, while also possessing just an uncanny brute strength that cornerbacks just frankly can't deal with. And when he gets in the open field, he can run away from just about anybody in the league. So, I mean, what can you say? I would love to get Devontae Smith more involved, but at the same time, A.J. Brown is just one of those dudes. And, I mentioned this last week, the continued featuring of A.J. Brown will lead to more Devontae Smith. It just will. You saw it in this game. A.J. Brown was lined up right next to Devontae. This was Devontae Smith's touchdown that he had. His 38-yard touchdown. He lined up right next to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown on the outside ran about 5 yards and stopped. And it looked like they were in zone, and the outside corner lined up over A.J. Brown. Technically was responsible for the deep third. I'd have to go back and double-check this. But Devontae was in the slot and pretty much just ran a straight go route and just ran straight. Didn't do anything, didn't do anything crazy. So he ran right by, and he was wide open because the corner just stepped up and stayed with A.J. Brown, and maybe he was expecting some safety help. Maybe one of the slot corners was supposed to trail him all the way instead of sitting in a zone. And Devontae Smith turns around and is backpedaling, catches it, and just shuffles into the end zone. And that is what I was expecting, and that is what I mean when I say that, more A.J. Brown will lead to more Devontae Smith. You have to set the tone and set your identity with a certain plan, because then that allows you to alter when your opponent starts to load up for your initial plan, and you want to rely on that initial plan. The Eagles' run game and AJ Brown, that's where they want their bread buttered. But at the same time, well, it's really run game, then AJ, and then Devontae and that stuff. So if the run game's not working, you go to AJ Brown. When AJ Brown's covered and they're kind of loading up in the box, well, then Devontae Smith's going to be wide open. And even if you do all that, then Dallas Goedert is still patrolling the middle of the field. So, their offensive skill players are really starting to blossom. They're really just absolutely turning up, and it's been great to see. I think they're finally starting to play offensively, at least some of their best football so far. And I think that this is the time of the year that we needed to be very sharp offensively, with all these great defenses either coming to town or we're going to see. So I'm very, very, very excited to see how, that we continue as we get more and more difficult tests for this offense. One thing that hasn't been phenomenal for the Eagles is the running game. It's continued to struggle with Cam Jurgens on the IR ever since he went out. Everyone was kind of like, the run game hasn't really been the same at all. And what he was able to do with that position with Cam Jurgens at the guard position was really able to set the tone in the running game. He's eligible to return from the IR this week. So, that is something that we do need to keep an eye on. But these are just some numbers for the running attack with and without Cam Jurgens. With Cam Jurgens, the team rushing success rate is 56%. Without Cam Jurgens, 42%. And speaking on DeAndre Swift, his yards per attempt with Cam Jurgens, 6.4, and his yards per attempt without Cam Jurgens, 3.7. Also, his EPA per play for DeAndre Swift is 0.26 with Cam Jurgens and minus 0.08 without Cam Jurgens. So DeAndre Swift has really taken a back seat ever since Cam Jurgens has kind of exited the lineup. So it seems, like I said, it seems as if he's getting healthy. It seems as if he will be reintegrated into the fold soon. It wouldn't be the worst idea if they sit him down this week, give him this week and the bye week, and then bring him back in Kansas City after the bye. But if he's healthy, let's go. Bring him out there, because even if, he gets dinged up or he's a little sore coming out of this game, obviously he hasn't played in 4 weeks, you get that bye week to recover and rest up and be, kind of, get back to form for the stretch run down the road. So, that's been one kind of thing that I think the Eagles themselves would say they've been struggling with and that they want to get going more. So, with Cam Jurgens hopefully returning, we can hopefully see that getting better. As we move to the defensive side of the ball, this was arguably their worst performance of the year. The defense has been great. Last week I gave Sean Desai an immense amount of credit. He's been great. Yeah, but in this game, there was a lot of communication breakdowns from the linebackers in the secondary in particular. But this happens when you have a ridiculous amount of injuries and you have different combinations of players. This is via Jimmy Jimmy Kempski, sorry, via on Twitter. This is the Eagles have had 8 different starting 5 combinations in their secondary. In 8 games, they've had 5 different combinations. So what I mean by starting 5 is cornerback 1, 2, and 3, and both of your starting safeties. Reed Blankenship has missed 2 games. Kevin Byard, this was his first game at safety, but you had Justin Evans play 3 games, Terrell Edmonds play 3 games, Sidney Brown play 1 game. So that was all in the secondary. You also had, at your starting cornerback, Darius Slay missed 1 game. He's played most of the year, but missed the Jets game. James Bradbury has missed 2 games, has missed 1 game against the Vikings with the concussion. Avonte Maddox went out week 2, has been out for the year. Then you have Josh Jobe, Mario Goodrich, Bradley Roby, Josiah Scott, Sidney Brown. These are all names that have been the starting cornerback 3 as the season have gone on. So, and it is a disclaimer that some of those cornerback 3s didn't technically start, but they wore the nickel corner that day, so technically the starting nickel. So that's tough. When you have that kind of turnover and when you have that kind of just continued shuffling, it's tough to keep the communication and to increase the speed of your communication, because that's one thing. Like, you often hear a lot of people say slow the game down. You hear that, it's kind of like a cliche in sports, but what they mean by that, and when they say that, is your mind's working faster. Your mind's not really working faster. You're just processing things faster. So when you see things, you already know your next thought. Whereas it's not, okay, I see this coverage. Okay, now what am I supposed to do? I go here. Okay, now I'm here. Now what do I do? It's not like, okay, I see cover 3. I'm here. Okay, now I'm here. I see receiver cutting in. I know exactly what to do. That's where you speed up in the game. It's not necessarily you're moving faster, you're doing things. Your mind's just processing the information much quicker, and you're able to read your teammates better. I see Darius Slay opening up on the inside, or I see him getting depth to a certain degree. I see him maybe eyeing up the quarterback to jump a route. Now I know I need to kind of peel back and help him out on the backside. That only comes with increased snaps, increased reps, and more game time. So I think that will get better as the season goes on. We're going to need a big bye week in terms of coming out of the bye against Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco, and Seattle, and Dallas. Obviously, we have Dallas this week, but we're going to need the secondary to play better. Obviously, with Kevin Byard, a massive pickup on the trade front, getting him 2 games now, getting him some game film, and then going into the bye week, allowing him to kind of see where he fits in and actually have some game time to show him where he's been good. Now we go into the second half of the season with him at full go. So I think that's been a crucial part to maybe where the Eagles defense has struggled a little bit so far. But I do think that that's something that will improve with time, as long as health permits. And they're able to keep the Eagles have also been, rumored and linked to some more secondary help, maybe some linebacker help. So I hope, obviously the trade deadline is today at 4 p.m. If anything big happens, you can check us out on Instagram. We'll probably have a video out on a big deal if it's something, massive. But overall, hopefully they're able to get in a rhythm and keep going. To kind of finish up our breakdown here, the defensive line did have a solid afternoon. It wasn't phenomenal, but, they were able to do a little bit. They were able to get after Sam Howell. They only had 1 sack, but of course, who else? Hassan Reddick. Let's just talk about Hassan Reddick and some numbers real quick. We did the same thing with the offense. Let's talk about last year versus this year with Hassan Reddick. Last year, Hassan Reddick had 16 sacks. Was in consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. And last year, through 8 games, he had 5.5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, and 5 tackle for losses. This season, he has 6.5 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, and 2 tackle for losses. So 1 more sack, 2 more quarterback hits, and 2 more tackle for losses. He has just been an absolute monster. And Kevin Agandi, SportsCenter anchor, drew this up from ESPN, stat courtesy of there. He is a true closer in this league. He is an absolute closer. And when the fourth quarter comes, he is ready to go. He is, the former Temple star, obviously Temple. He has 11.5 sacks in the fourth quarter over the last 2 seasons combined. And that leads the NFL. And I know for a fact this year, he already has 3. Just off the top of my head, he had 2 against the Rams, and then this one against Washington. So he just has had just an immense impact late in the game, late in the fourth quarter, and he's just been just an absolute monster. What else can you ask for from your superstar edge rusher? And it just puts games away. He closes them, and he forces offensive minds to think about him and stay up late through the night. So overall, a great performance. It really seemed like they were playing from behind most of the game, but then during the second half, they were really able to take over. They were able to take the ball away, which was really, really nice. And then they were also able to, shut the door at the end of the game. The turnovers on their end, obviously, 2 fumbles. You don't like to see that. It was 2-1 in terms of the turnover battle, but it's just something you got to continue to clean up. It's only 1 game this year I think we've had with no turnovers. And yet we've continued to win games. So as long as we can continue to clean up those mistakes, no interceptions for Jalen Hurts this game. Great to see. But he did fumble the ball, obviously, on the goal line. On the brotherly shove, that rarely happens, so I'm not super worried about that. But the Kenneth Gainwell fumble on the goal line, he's got to work on that. He's got to work on that, and he knows that. They addressed that. So we'll see how it goes. They do have the Dallas Cowboys this week. I want to see if I can maybe get a line. I think the line opened at Eagles -3. Eagles -3 is the line as of right now. They are home. I'll take them to cover. I'll take the 3 points and take the Birds to cover. Cowboys coming off a monster win off the bye versus the Rams. And, I think, they're due for a little emotional letdown, although this game will be extremely hyped up. I think the Eagles, fought and got a good win, whereas the Cowboys just had a massive, massive win in terms of everything clicked for them. So, I do think the Eagles are in a little better situational spot coming in, and they're home, one of the best home field advantage in the sport. It's a 4:25 game, national game technically, so, everyone's going to be amped up, ready to go. And that's going to wrap up our talk for the Birds this week. And as we wrap up the show, I think it's time. It's time that I finally said goodbye to the Phillies season. I know I was on here a week ago, and I was talking about getting ready for Game 7. I remember it like it was yesterday. And yet, I'm sitting on my couch last night watching the Arizona Diamondbacks in the World Series. It is time, though. It's time. It's important to let the dead lie, I guess you could say. But it's important to leave it in the past. What else can you say about the Phil season? They had an absolutely magical ride. So many storylines, so much camaraderie, so much exciting times for the Phils, only to be punctuated with just a total letdown. Obviously, the last 2 seasons have not ended how we've wanted at all. We still are losing. We don't go home with anything, but there is a lot of positives to take out. Obviously, last year we won the National League pennant. This year we had 1 win to go before we would have repeated as National League champions with 2 games at home. I mean, you give me that, I'm taking that 10 times out of 10. If you're telling me the Phillies have 2 home games and they're up 3-2 in the National League Championship Series with Aaron Nola and then Ranger Suarez on the mound, I'm sorry, but I'm taking that 9 times. If you told me that in spring training I was going to get that, I would have signed up for that immediately. But, it just didn't work out. And I was telling a lot of people this when we were talking about it. You had 2 men on and Trey Turner and Bryce Harper coming to the plate. What else can you really ask for? At the end of the day, it's the 7th inning. You're down 2, right? And you have $600 million coming up to the plate. And obviously they didn't get it done. Trey Turner hit 400 in the playoffs. Bryce Harper hit high 300s. And they were the hottest hitters in the playoffs. And still, 6 times out of 10, you're expecting them not to get the job done. 5 times out of 10, you're still expecting them not to get the job done. So I think it was really, it was maybe a little bit better in my mind or for my coping that it was those 2 that were up, with as the go-ahead runs. Bryce Harper just missed a couple opposite field home runs in those last 2 games. Nick Castellanos missed a couple shots. I mean, Nick just absolutely folded. He had the home run in his first at-bat in the National League Championship Series and then did not have a hit the rest of the series. That went 7 games. So that was just totally, after being one of the hottest hitters in the playoffs, that was just really upsetting. Bryce Harper definitely cooled off a little bit. You expected him to step up in those moments, and unfortunately, he just kind of ran out of a little bit of magic. Trey Turner kind of struggled with runners in scoring position down the stretch. Schwarber was okay, obviously had the home runs. The Game 5, Bryce and Kyle gave them the 3-2 lead with some monster homers. Bomer was doing okay. But, this really just came down to missed opportunities for the Phillies. Aaron Nola, what was his issue all season long? Home runs. What kind of came back to bite him in Game 6? home runs, back-to-back home runs given up in the second or I think it was the third inning maybe. I think it was actually the second inning, and then gives up an RBI double the next batter after the back-to-back home runs. So he kind of the wheels kind of finally fell off for Nola. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do with him this offseason. I think they bring him back. I think like what he since 2018 he's like thrown the most innings in the league. He's got like top 5 in strikeouts. Like I think he is the type of pitcher you want to rely on. If they do let him go, if he does leave, Dave Dombrowski's already said that they're going to bring in a front of the rotation type of starter. So, they are going to address the front line of their rotation no matter what. But I think you bring him back. I think he's comfortable in Philadelphia. This season, he showed more than he did last season. Last season he looked very good coming into the postseason in the clincher in Houston and in the wild card game too. Last season he was lights out, and then in the division series, he had another good start against the Braves, and then in the championship series and the World Series he really kind of struggled. But then in this season, he was absolutely dominant in the wild card series, dominant in the division series, and in his first start of the championship series was very, very, very good. And then just in the second start, just kind of fell apart, and that's where it really, he really struggled to continue that momentum. I think the Phillies learned something by giving him some added rest throughout the season to allow him to be a little bit more in form as the playoffs went on. But honestly, it doesn't come down to pitching really at all for me. Obviously, the Phillies had leads in Game 3 and Game 4, and their bullpen blew it after being one of the best bullpens in the playoffs up until that point. But at the end of the day, this just comes down to offense. You were up 1-0 in Game 3, and it was because of a wild pitch. And then you end up losing 2-1, right? And then you're up 5-2 in Game 4, and your bullpen blows that. So, your offense did the job there. The offense did the job in Game 5, but then you score 1 run, you score 2 runs in 2 games in Philadelphia. But it might have been even 3 runs if I'm remembering correctly. But you scored 2 or 3 runs in 2 games at home to close it out. Your pitching can only be so good. It can only be so good. Your hitters need to step up. You knew in that game you were going to have to score 4 or 5 runs at least to win in Game 7, and they just weren't able to get it done. So I think the biggest thing was they had their guys up when it mattered most. They had their guys. If you could have picked, let's say you're given the situation down 2, 7th inning, you could not have picked 2 guys you would have rather had at the plate than Trey Turner and Bryce Harper as the tying runs. You just couldn't. So at the end of the day, we just kind of have to be okay with that and go into the offseason and, strap up, rest up, and do it again next year, because this team ain't going nowhere. They showed this season that doesn't matter who comes into CBP, they can beat anybody, but they do need to understand that just because they're playing in CBP doesn't guarantee a win. They need to make sure they come ready to play, and I think they will. I think they learned a lot about themselves this year. Maybe not to sniff themselves so much and to really continue to keep their head down and work. I think that's really, really important. So we'll see kind of how the offseason goes. You can guarantee we'll be talking about the hot stove this winter. There's going to be moves made by the Phillies, so we'll see kind of what they do there. But you can guarantee we will be tuning on from there. But overall, 1 win away from a pennant. Unfortunately, not able to get the job done, but there was a lot to be excited for this season. The number 1 wild card, 90 wins. We win the wild card series. We beat the Braves in the division series, and then we have a lot of fun moments in the championship series. But just to be honest, the Diamondbacks came in and we punched them straight in the mouth, knocked them down to the mat, 2-0. Early series lead. We knocked them down to the mat, and they just got up and they kept fighting, and they ended up knocking us out all the way at the end in Game 7. So shout out to the Diamondbacks. I still hope the Rangers win. I'm not hoping the Diamondbacks win, but overall, a great season, and we'll be back once the stove starts getting a little hot. But that is going to do it for the show today, guys. Once again, click the description in the below for all our social media handles. You can see all them there. Feel free to shoot us any questions. We'll answer them live on the show. And thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here again next time.